Well, thank you all for settling in so promptly. It's a challenge to race between rooms. The next session I am personally very excited to introduce, and the topic, the growth department, the future of B2B sales and marketing integration. So this is hosted by Man Bites Dog, an award-winning agency, and one that, in fact, was the world's first thought leadership consultancy, started 20 years ago by Claire as founder. So really deep in this space, but I didn't realise that Man Bites Dog, you always learn something when you come to Propolis, wasn't expecting that MBD also stands for Marketing and Business Development. I love when a TLA has many acronyms that you can use in multiple ways. So it's a very warm welcome to Claire Mason, founder, as I said, and CEO of Man Bites Dog, and the floor is hers and her fabulous panel to do the intros. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Shane. Thank you. And thank you for choosing our session when you have so much to choose from as well. Well, I'm delighted to have a fantastic panel for you today. I'm joined by David Keene, who has held senior marketing leadership positions at Google, Salesforce, and I never know how to say it, Wipro, Wipro, who knows, Wipro. And also by Mike Scott, who is Senior Vice President of Marketing at Hitachi Rail, and has also held senior leadership positions at GE and Alstom. I've had many marketing adventures with David over the years, including locking C-suite board leaders in an escape room, and it was very cool to do so some years ago. And I'm learning a lot from Mike, including the true meaning of bogies, which means something quite different in the railway world. But before we get into our panel discussion, I wanted to provide a bit of context for our discussion on the future of the growth department, the future of B2B sales and marketing integration. As we heard this morning, business has a major growth problem. We're stuck in a doom loop of economic shocks and stagnation, which is leading to an over-focus on efficiency and a lot of indecision, which causes us real problems when we're trying to close those sales deals. But there's a growing realisation in business that they can't cut their way to growth, and they can't wait for perfect conditions, because uncertainty isn't a bug in the system. Today, uncertainty is the system. So we're starting to see businesses think about how they remaster the art of growth and how they create greater accountability in their leadership team for that growth. But there's still an empty seat at the table on leadership teams when it comes to a person responsible for growth and value creation rather than simply risk mitigation and governance. So what we really need is a growth department. And what we're seeing is a drive towards breaking the silos and a move towards integrating sales and marketing, including the rise of the Chief Revenue Officer and the Chief Growth Officer, to bring all of this together. And one of the most interesting areas this is showing up in is in the world of thought leadership. So the impact of thought leadership on brand and demand generation is somewhat understood, but its critical role in sales conversion and creating a platform for growth, for integrating sales and marketing, is often overlooked. As we heard, if anyone was in Joel's session earlier this morning, thought leadership is not random acts of content. It's about that big transformative idea for your customers that gives you a platform for growth in the shape of a compelling new proposition and offer and positioning, and an integrated thought leadership campaign that gives you a platform to integrate sales and marketing and bridge from brand to sales. There's a lot more detail about this in our new Thought Makers research report, which is based on interviews with C-suite buyers in multi-billion-dollar organisations. And that's all about how they engage with thought leadership and how it influences their buying behaviour. You can find it on this QR code, and Jago here also has a few hard copies at the front, or ask us later. For now, I just want to make 4 quick points before we dive into our panel discussion. Our report introduces a new taxonomy of thought leadership, in which we highlight thought makers as the highest form of thought leadership, based on exceptional differentiation of ideas and exceptional amplification too. And we can think about thought leadership as a wave where you have thought makers in the vanguard creating a new wave of thinking by applying that energy. And they start that wave moving. Then you have thought shapers who surf the second wave, but who surf the wave by applying new perspectives to that origin idea. And then at the end, you've got thought followers who are thought, that can be thought of as third wave content that lacks the power and energy of thought makers. And that's the zone of brand damaging, what we call crap tent, which we're seeing a lot more of these days with AI generated content. It's that averagely generated random acts of content, which if anything are doing brand damage. One of the most interesting findings from our research is the fact that for business, B2B brands have emerged as a source of truth, if not the source of truth. Almost everyone is consuming B2B high-quality thought leadership every week. 55% of these C-suite decision makers are consuming it every day. And what's even more interesting is that they trust content from these sources, more than content from media, government, and public institutions. But they want to know that this is coming from genuine human experts. They want to know it's not they're not being catfished by AI. Demand for insight from thought leadership is also growing. 77% of these very important leaders expect their strategic suppliers to challenge them on emerging trends and issues. They really want to hear from you. And they told us that they use it to business case these big transformative investments, to get views on innovation and to really get insights on where the market is going. And finally, truly thought-leading B2B content is not just attracting attention and building trust, it's driving sales. 74% of these C-suite decision makers in the world's largest companies told us that they always consider a strategic supplier's thought leadership when making a buying decision, and you can see this in buying journeys as well. So, how do we deliver on our mandate to be the growth department and harness integrated thought leadership to cover the full funnel? Well, let's ask our panel. So I wanted to start with the big picture. So, David, as someone who's had marketing and leadership roles in some very commercially focused organisations, what do you see as the characteristic approaches of sales versus marketing, and how on earth can organisations bring these two very different tribes together?
Wow, that's a big question. Thank you for having me on the panel, and hello to everyone. To me, sales and marketing are on the same team, but they're playing different positions in the game that you're in. And if your organization has these functions kind of fighting each other and fighting internally, or not playing in a team-based way, then you're not going to get to winning the particular sport that you are in, whatever that kind of particular B2B, B2C, kind of, whatever kind of platform you're selling, whatever product you're selling. So to me, this is about finding a way of bringing together sales, marketing, product as well, and then probably also customer success. So there's kind of, there's 4 key pillars there under your success for your team. Let's say we take a football team, kind of analogy of all of this. You're playing different positions and you need to pass the ball and you need to work in different ways. The core of the difference for me between sales and marketing is that sales are looking at a very short-term approach to the world. And they're thinking about, how do I make my number in the short term? Marketing should be thinking about, how do we influence the way the business grows in the long term? How do we balance brand and demand and growth? So you're kind of playing with a different timeline in all of this. And then obviously you've got product, which is running at an even longer timeline here, and trying to create a very sustainable growth in the capabilities of the product, and not just responding to the customer need, but responding also to the market opportunity. And then obviously you've got customer success, who are kind of running day to day very, very fast, just to keep people happy and stop them churning. So you get these different functions here, and the growth department to me is this unification of them all around a particular kind of message stack, message house, whatever framing you want to use in all of that.
And what do you see as the role of thought leadership in that unification? What kind of role can it play?
So to me, marketing should be thinking about like a programmatic approach. And I don't mean programmatic as in programmatic ads. I mean programmatic as in the big program. What are the programs we are running as a business? And I think if you think about the growth ambitions that the organization has, and if you can sit down with the rest of the C-suite, all the senior leaders together and say, right, what is our strategy as a business? What is our growth strategy? And let's start to get, if you go back to like a message house structure and think about the roof of your growth house, that's really the numbers. That's really what you're targeting, the number of new logos, the growth in revenue, those kind of things. And then there's a bunch of pillars and foundations underneath that you're bringing all of those pieces in together. And your programs really support, they come from that. They're based around a message structure. How are you differentiated in the market? How are you going to grow? Are you just kind of giving a list of features and functions? Or are you thinking really about, trying to change the way people think about things? Are you going into people's echo chambers, or are you making them think about something new? So let's say you're a marketing leader and you've got 5 big programs that are running, and they should run across the year. And the programs are made up of individual campaigns and tactics and event and stuff like that. Then your thought leadership should be a key engine inside of that program, individual programs that are running there. And it's the power source for the program.
Yeah, you can see how it drives everything, because if you have that thought maker position and you have that compelling offer for the clients, then you can run it through everything else, can't you, and really set yourself apart. And Mike, just coming to a similar question around how do you get the fundamentals right to bring sales and marketing together? I've spoken to a lot of people about this. It's a huge challenge. So how have you found that works
lots
best?
of shouting.
There's always a lot of shouting.
I think your point about starting with a strategy and then working down from that's important. And then how you then work from your customers, your segments, and then back and make them join up is the kind of the art of it. The piece of work we've been doing with you, Claire, we've really tried to design it for brand to demand and beyond, to your point about customer success. And really this is called the Better Connected report. We've been running it for 3 years, and the report came out of COVID, and our strategic driver was we sponsored COP26. We had a new decarbonisation strategy, and we had really good evidence for 2 of the 3 pillars. We could talk about how we were decarbonising ourselves, our products for our customers, but the biggest lever we could pull as an industry was the modal shift, so getting people out of cars and off planes and onto trains. And so that was the thing that we started with. It was a brand problem. There were markets we wanted to raise our profile in where we'd been struggling. It was really media driven. But when we sat down to do the planning and to try to connect these 2 worlds, brand to demand, together, and we spent some time with some of our sales teams, we found this extra layer of complexity, I think, on top of what you were talking about, which was that each of the regional sales teams really wanted something different from the report. And that went from, guys, look, we're really well integrated with our customers here. This isn't that useful for us, so the press release is fine, but we're the dominant player in the market. We don't kind of need it. All the way to great for the business development team. The media weren't lapping it up at all, but suddenly we could get into the head of procurement at a major customer that we couldn't get to before. And everything in between. I mean, we built a prospect list of 15,000. We just launched Salesforce marketing automation, and it helped us build a global list. And we sell railways, so there aren't that many customers out there. But the ability then to have this common platform from which we could then run campaigns, mini versions of that campaign, sort of spurs, just really gave us a very useful tool, both from the brand point of view globally, but also the local activation was really where we saw the return on investment, customer not just finding it useful and it being evidenced in the engagement scores in the Salesforce tool, but customers actually using it proactively in their external lobbying, issuing press releases, using our research to justify their requests for more funding in government.
And I think that's an interesting angle as well, because I think given the economic cycle we've been in, marketing has been under huge pressure to justify revenue and to actually directly generate revenue. But you also talked about, is it the growth department or is it the competitive advantage department?
I think that's a great point. We talked about AI and do we use it, how do we use it, and is it going to get rid of all the marketing jobs? And at the end of the day, it won't, because there's a whole bunch of marketers working in your competitor organisations who are looking for cut through. They're looking for attention and engagement and connections. And so I think it's been said a lot, but you either deploy these tools, tactics and methodologies, grow and outcompete your competitors, or you eventually will start to lose traction in the marketplace. It will affect brand and it will affect sales down the road as well.
And I remember you talked about how the thought leadership was not only cutting through from a sort of sales perspective, but also with other stakeholders in terms of your employer brand, scaling up the business quickly, and permitting and public engagement as well.
It's been huge. One of the conversations I had when we were doing our annual planning cycle a couple of years ago, I kept asking the business stakeholder, how can I help you win? You know, we sell turnkey railways, how can I help you win? And he said, you're asking me absolutely the wrong question. It should be, how can you help me make money? Because when we sell a €2 billion railway, we don't get all that money in one go. We get serviced by being able to mobilise teams really quickly on the ground and hit that first delivery milestone, and then everything else from there will make it a successful project or not. So our employer brand became really important, and we know from all our research into our employer space as an employer brand, we know that the number one driver is sustainability. So this report helped build credibility for our recruits as well. We've seen huge uptick in our all the metrics that matter to the HR team, as well as the vanity metrics on the marketing side as well.
And just picking up on what you were saying about AI, like, you know, David, should we all get our coats and leave? You know, like, has AI killed marketing? Do we need marketing now? And do we have a quality issue when we do rely on AI?
So AI is just a tool, you know, and if you go back to the introduction of new tools kind of throughout the technology cycles that we've all been through, depending on how young or old you are, and I may age myself here, each of those cycles has changed the way that we work. And there's been disruption associated with that cycle change as it comes through. And it could be, you know, if I think way back in the day, you know, the introduction of the laptop and the PC changed everything. The introduction of the internet changed everything. You know, I can actually remember the company I was working for, them introducing TCP/IP so we could connect to the internet, which sounds really dated now. My kids are like, what do you mean? Everything didn't have the same protocol. Through mobile, through social, through you know apps, through all of these different kind of phases, AI is another tool. It's disrupting everybody. Everyone's getting freaked out about the whole thing. But we're marketers. We're looking at those program structures. We're looking at the message we're taking out. We're looking at how we differentiate. And if you start from kind of a market intelligence perspective, just looking at the market you're operating in and understanding, what are the other players in that market? How do they come together? How do they differentiate? Do you differentiate in this market, or are you an also-ran? And then starting to think about how you tell a story. And, every marketeer should be a storyteller. We need to think about how we tell stories and how we use AI and phones and social and all of the other innovations that have been out there to tell stories. The AI will not just come up with clever stories for you to do this whole thing. It was interesting, I was at MadFest yesterday up at the Truman Brewery, the old Truman Brewery, which is a lot more B2C. And Sir Martin Sorrell was up there doing like his opening keynote, just back from Cannes with an amazing suntan. I didn't go to Cannes, as you can see. And his view was like, AI will just reduce the cost of production across the board. My view is slightly different, and I wouldn't wish to say anything against Sir Martin in any way whatsoever, but I think it increases the quality. And actually your costs are probably going to stay roughly the same. You're going to get more from the people that you're working with, because all the other people you're competing with in your segment are going to do the same thing. And if you just like drop to low cost, you're going to turn into the Lidl of your particular market. And actually, you probably don't want to be there because that's a low margin world. And if you're looking to sell, particularly in the B2B world, some kind of solution, software, whatever, services, you're looking to maximize your margin, in which case you need differentiation and you need a clever solution and a clever piece of messaging and thought leadership that backs that up for people. You know, and the thought leadership that you're talking about here, the growth department, and I love that graph, that really is how you differentiate, how you justify your price point in all of this. Otherwise, you're going to get involved in all these things are the same, who's the cheapest, and you don't want to be there.
And the sorts of people that you're selling to, these are very, very high value sales at enterprise level in
Correct.
the railway world as well. It's huge. So it's another level. And I mean, are we seeing, it's often mooted, you know, do you guys think we're seeing a return to brand? Having been so focused on demand recently?
So
Either, yeah, go for it, Mike.
I actually wanted to pick up on what David was saying. I'll
Yeah,
try and
go
make
for
all
it.
the tangents
No, that's all good.
connect. I'm really interested in sort of a little bit forgetting about all our organisational structures altogether. You know, there's businesses do two things: they make things and sell things, and everyone else is helping you do one of those two things, and you can kind of call them what they want. We've seen a little bit in the keynotes today and around the exhibition hall that the exciting technological leap, I think, that's really coming is just we're going to stop, if I can extend your metaphor, we're going to stop playing football in the dark, right? That 50% of advertising work. Well, I just think, you know, we write a piece of content, we throw it out. It's like playing football with your eyes closed. You don't know, you kick the ball, you just have no idea until the end of the match whether anybody scored a goal. Like you're doing your monthly or quarterly reports and you can't tell which kicks scored goals and which ones didn't. And that technology is improving all the time. And the more that we're able to understand that when we pull this lever, we get this result. So you keep pulling that lever, and then the day when you stop seeing that result, you need to be thinking about a different lever. That's just really where I think all of this is going. Whether that will definitely mean different jobs and different skills, but it always has. But I get really excited about that. and I think then the other part of it is the creative, which takes the tangent back to thought leadership.
Yeah.
If you don't have a big idea, and if you're not trying to create content that is either minimal interesting, but ideally just really valuable for customers, then you're just not going to compete.
Yeah.
Because why would you?
Yeah,
So-
why would someone spend time with you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
And
that's-
why would they see you as an expert? Yeah.
Exactly.
Let me maybe pick up on the brand question. I think there is a return to brand. If we look at what's happened over maybe the past 5+ years, or kind of from early before COVID, the idea there was we could work in an algorithmic way to figure out somebody who has intent for something and try and sell to them. So like, okay, somebody's got intent, we're going to try and sell to them. We're going to try and win that. We're going to try and maximize that. So we've created these demand echo chambers effectively in there. So, you know, if I'm looking for something online, I'm then going to get a whole bunch of ads around that thing that I'm looking for online. But we know that most people aren't currently in the market and currently looking for stuff. So if this is the whole, if you like, set, to go back to kind of GCSE maths, set of people that could possibly buy your thing, and 5% of them are kind of in market and looking for stuff, you're all fighting over the 5%. Where growth and thought leadership really comes in is where you look at, okay, how do we mobilize more of the 95%? You know, that's more the blue ocean strategy in all of this, rather than the 5% is the red ocean piece. And you're all scrapping away in there. How do we get them? How do we give them offers? How do we reduce our price? How's about we find the people that we can tip over from the 95% into wanting to talk to us in some way through really clever and thoughtful storytelling, content, thought leadership. And that to me is the really exciting piece of brand. But coming back to your point about turning the lights on, we have to link the creative piece with the underlying tech piece. That's the piece that's been broken. I was meeting this morning with a creative agency for one of the clients that I have, talking about how we were going to do this. And they had amazing creative ideas and then didn't have the layer of plumbing underneath. So to me, this is like, how do we bring the ad creative, the thought leadership creative, the growth creative piece together with the right plumbing, targeting particular groups of buyers, maybe doing kind of like hyper personalization with that thought leadership that you're bringing in there and putting all of that together. So I think brand comes back most definitely. I think people stop fighting in that 5% piece, and we start thinking about how brand can then bring us back into that kind of other bigger world. I think the final thing I'd say on this is brand has been neglected by an awful lot of businesses recently. And if you think about the brands that you like out there, like which brand, I won't do a show of hands, but which brand do you think is doing an amazing job right now at positioning their brand in the world? I'm really struggling with that. There's so few organizations out there that are like, that brand is amazing. It's doing it's made me think of something that I didn't know I needed, and I've spent money on it now. So there's a real kind of missing link there around those brands.
I think also with the buying unit just getting so big as we get more risk averse, the amount of decisions. So we're doing a major project for a big consultancy firm at the moment about exactly how decision making works in the board, and the amount of decisions of a relatively low value that are now crossing the CFO's desk is scary. So you've got to cover that whole unit, and you've got to kind of cover that market. And Micah's going to ask you about sustaining it as well. So part of that broadening out is also how do you sustain that thought leadership position?
I mean, to jump from the buying group point as well, I mean, in the railway sector, and I used to work in the energy sector as well, we serve a customer, but those customers are often either integrated into government or they are sort of at arm's length, but still are fundamentally providing a public service. All railways around the world are subsidised and receive taxpayer money, and people, like probably everybody here, use public transport to get here, and so everybody has an opinion and an experience of it, and also highly unionised as well. And so to get to, short cycle sales just doesn't exist in our world. Everything is 18 months absolutely minimum, and that's probably with a customer that you've already sold things to and you're embedded in. We could be relying on Japanese finance, and so it's bigger than just, oh, that's the customer, here's an archetype or a persona, and here's some content, we'll just keep hitting them. So what we really try to think through, as we said earlier, is we have our big overarching strategy, and over the 3 years that we ran this thought leadership report, it started with decarbonisation, it then moved to new market entry for a new segment. We started selling smart ticketing services, so if you're ever in Genoa, you can turn Bluetooth on your phone and walk onto any piece of the 14 different types of public transport they have in that city, and you will pay a flat fee at 4 a.m. in the morning automatically. So we're putting the technology in Wales and other places as well. So there was a sort of a segment entry opportunity a couple of years ago, and we were able to take the research and repurpose it. Like, we know what passengers want. They want to be better connected with the ticketing. But market by market, each geography, timing is everything. So I think for us and for the media, so our kind of awareness push, we really want to make that research to report and launch as tight as possible, big launch, this is the week, the day it happens, and it's going live everywhere. But what we know from painful experience is, take this year, Spain was a big market for us, and we really wanted to make a success. We had a great government, customer, media launch planned, and that was all on the same week. We had the electricity blackouts, and the entire Spanish railway runs on electricity. There's no diesel or anything. So that's bad timing. So we pulled the report, we shelved it, we came back, and we've learned over the years to just start really staggering the rollout based on when's it going to be most valuable for our customers. And as much as possible, can we give them something that's useful for them to use, not just sit and read and think about us, but for them to use in their conversations with the people that pay them. What you guys have been helpful with this year for us is going deeper into the data and identifying which markets where we might be needing to focus helping policymakers make decisions, because actually the transport system's great, but people aren't using it. And that's a policy issue, marketing, persuade people to use the train. And other markets, actually it's an investment issue. The public transport could be better, and then we have different strategic plays. So actually we're going to sell some technology here, we're going to position some of our cool software to this market because we think that will help them solve their reliability issue or whatever it happens to be. So what's been interesting is it's actually not just been born of our strategy, it's started to change our strategy, not just for the activation of the thought leadership, but our approach to that market in general.
And I think that having the customer at the heart of everything and creating something with authority that's genuinely valuable is so important. So that study is actually about the customer's customer and how they can grow using whichever lever, as you say. And I think that's really critical. And I think that then means that you're then in charge of your timing because you have the most valuable asset. So you can choose when to put it into market, which is really helpful. Final quick question, and then I'll see if we have any Q&A. What do you both what's your final reflection on the role of thought leadership in bringing together sales and marketing and integrating them so that you can grow a business at scale?
Maybe if I kick off on that one. To me, it's all about understanding the customer and putting the customer at the center, as I think you've said, and then thinking about, what's our game plan here? What's our strategy? If this is like a football game or whatever sport you're playing, then we need to go out and we need to understand who's the opposition, how do they play, what are they going to do, how can we play differently so that we get around them, particularly if we're kind of evenly matched in all of this. And thought leadership can be the thing that can give you that advantage. I think the other thing, another interesting idea, and it comes back to the point about these buying groups, these large buying committees. One interesting strategy that I've been working on recently with a client is around expanding the buying group rather than reducing it. So often you see buying groups, people try to pull it down and say, okay, we need like just one person to decide, and we're going to really influence this. The CEO has to decide this. Another interesting strategy is to try and say, let's grow the buying group inside the organization, and let's get a bigger group of people with a stronger opinion all going, but what about these guys? They're so much better than these other people. Like, why are you going to choose them exactly? We've been looking at this other thing over here. So using tools like, as a marketing leader, such as Sales Navigator, using things like Sixth Sense or Demand Base, to map intent, etc., using maybe behavioral tracking kind of tools around the people you identify, and then taking the thought leadership and using the thought leadership as a market disruptor is a really interesting angle there to say, I'm going to create almost what's the word I'm looking for, like a wave inside the organization towards you and away from your competition. So it can do something really, really clever, I think, in that world.
I have found there's a mix of structure and serendipity. And so for us, the structure, the programmatic approach really matters. Being ready to capture the opportunities that come off the back has been the difference between the markets where it's been really successful and the markets where, to be totally honest with you, and I think that the chap from Dell said something similar, just this sort of stuff doesn't work in some places and the sales team aren't behind it and you maybe don't have local team to activate it. So probably it's not a door that's worth pushing on if you've limited resources and you can only push on so many doors. So making choices about what you're not going to do is often just as important as what you're going to focus on. And I think that what we've found is that just including the sales teams in the planning, trying to get a voice of the customer properly externally in your research, or even just internally through your in-house interactions, that early buy-in really makes a difference with whether it's going to fly or not at the other end of the launch.
I would so agree with that. I think for great thought leadership, you need everyone in the room, and ideally you work backwards from what do we want to sell, and do we even need to change the product or service and disrupt that and disrupt the proposition, and then you go into the loop of the ideation to take that to market. Now, I'm aware that we are now standing between you and lunch. We'll hang around for a minute if anyone wants to ask us a question, but for anyone that is hungry, we will let you go. So thank you so much.
Huge thank you to the panel. We've had thought